on one platform, and then where's Twitch? And I see us on Twitch. That's looking great. Hello, Internet, and welcome to a couple minutes early for Heroes Die Show. I am Jason, your game master today, just a regular participant and chatter, and I am joined by my good friends Josh and Paula.
Hello.
Josh, sorry, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Josh. I don't know. I play Zagrin in Best Left Buried, and I play Rickbin in Heroes of Windgrove.
I am Paula. I play Lorraine in Heroes of Windgrove and Kit in Best Left Buried.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so folks, we're a bit early, so we're mostly going to chat. But today is, as you've seen, if you've seen the title, is a Let's Chat episode. So you can probably guess what we're doing. Just chatting about, really just chatting about whatever, Dungeons and Dragons, how we're putting the show together, that kind of stuff. So we'll give y'all a minute to come on, then we'll hop in, and you can get all the good announcements. That's the best part.
I feel totally thrown off because we don't have our typical announcement routine.
I know
Right.
if you've been watching for a while, you've seen progressively our announcements get more and more streamlined. And when I finally felt like we got a handle on it, we just pulled the rug out from under us. And
gotta keep us on our toes.
yeah.
Yeah. I really love I actually love the new dynamic, but I love how you can always count on Mike to do something like totally out of left field.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, I think that it's funny. They do get progressively more freeform each time, I think. Like, the Discord, it's like the link will follow. It's going to be right there. But the social medias, it depends what's happening in the social media world and how that one's going to plug. The Patreon is, again, going to change based on each month. And then Mike is a wild card. So
Yes. Yeah,
I like
time.
how you said freeform. I was going to say unhinged. But...
yeah. Accurate.
All right. So speaking of which, I'm going to share our Discord link. So it's 1 Central Time. You are here just in time for what was going to be episode 11, but instead we're doing a Let's Chat show because we've had some things come up for folks. So we're pivoting, staying agile, and
so flexible.
Yeah. So like I said, you can join us on Discord. You can find us on Paul. Actually, I know you've got this part. Our social media.
No. Yes. Social media. We have a Instagram, we have a TikTok, and we have a Twitter. And on all of those platforms, you can find us at Heroes Die Show. And the TikTok is where you'll find funny little clips, and same kind of for Instagram. And then Twitter is really like where you'll find updates on the show. Josh runs that, funny memes, just anything that's going on with Heroes Die, you can find on our Twitter.
Great. And then, Josh, you can tell folks about Patreon, right?
Yeah, so we also have a Patreon if you want to support the show or just get some cool TTRPG stuff. It's a great place to check out. Never required, always appreciated. We have a micro RPG system on there, modules for 5e and for that system. There's going to be a solo RPG coming out next month, so subscribe now and you'll get that as soon as it comes out on May 1st. We also have merch, and you get a merch discount code with our Patreon, but we have our merch through Big Cartel, including mugs, wizard hats, shirts, those sorts of things. Yes, our famous mugs. So you can check that at Big Cartel. All the links should be down below or in the About Us section. And all the links are available in our Discord, so join us there as well. I also want to give a shout out. This is not affiliated with Heroes Die. It's not us running it, but hopefully at least one of us, me, will be participating. The Meowrathon is coming up. check out best source of information for that is probably the Twitter at ODND pod. That's the letter ODND pod. It's a cool charity stream that's going to be going on in the summer in June that supports a cat charity. If you're interested in GMing a game, you can play any system. They're doing GM signups now, but there should be a schedule coming out soon for if you want to play. And if not, it's a lot of fun to watch, a lot of cat themed games. And so check out OD&D Pod on Twitter for updates on that. And that's all my announcements.
Highly recommend. I played last year and it was very fun. And I can't remember the name of the cat themed game that we played, but it was like a cat system where everybody played a cat. And my mind is blank right now, but it was very fun. And it's fun to watch too. There's a lot of fun games that people play on there. So
yeah, it sounds that sounds really cool. I think it's a really neat concept, right? When you can do like playing a game and get some benefit to charity. That's a nice combination of things.
It's also a really great way to meet cool people too. Like there's a lot of really great people that participate, and yeah.
Right, isn't that how you met Josh?
Essentially.
Kind of, yeah. We had met, but then we played some games together, and I got to know Josh a little better through that, and yeah.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Right.
Participate and meet Josh. That's or Paula. Honestly, it's a pretty big potential reward. Just gonna put that out there. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, so like I said earlier, today we're not going to be doing the normal episode 11 of Best Left Buried. Instead, we're doing a bit of a chat show. So if you're watching, if you have questions, it would be super cool if you'd put them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them to the best of our ability. And I think with that, we might as well just jump right in. We also have prepared a little content for you, just a bit. So with that, Josh, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So obviously we have a lot of cliffhanger endings, and when we last left ourselves in Best Left Buried, it was absolutely a cliffhanger, as I think two players have 2 hit points each. The crazy monster decided to dip back into the shadows. So I wanted to start at the endings of these shows, and I wanted to ask Jason, how do you decide when you're gonna cut off an episode? You have a spot that you want us to get to, or is it you start seeing the time is winding down and you look for a net? So tell us a little bit about how we get these awesome cliffhanger endings right at the top of the show.
Yeah, this is genuinely the best question I've ever gotten. So I love this already. Hold on, I have something for you. So I found a while ago, I was like looking at other systems. So I have an answer. I'm just going to take the long way around to it. So I picked up this really cool, based on some advice I saw online, I picked up this really cool RPG system. So in my case, I picked up the Index Card RPG system, or ICRPG. And among the really cool and neat content, they have kind of a system. They have their own system, and they intend the thing to be used by folks that are comfortable kind of mixing and matching or creating their own stuff, right? So there's a good bit of rules, but there's a lot of room for people to do their own tinkering as they build things. And speaking of which, I borrow a ton of things for that for us, right? Like when we play, I use a bunch of things, either rules they have or advice they give when we play 5e, because I find it fits really well with what we're doing. Like I tend to give scenes like a target number, right? So maybe the target number is 12, or maybe it's 10, or maybe it's 15, or whatever that may be. And then essentially I look at what you're trying to do. Is the thing you're trying to do easy or hard or standard, right? If it's easy, I reduce the target number by 3 for you. If it's hard, I increase it by 3. We still have advantage and disadvantage. You have all that cool stuff, but that's not in this book. So I'm still working my way in. Um, but one of the things they talk about a lot is looking for ways to end a session, right? So there's a bunch of really great DMing advice in this awesome book that I highly recommend for all of you folks out there. Um, and there's a bunch of really good DMing advice. And one of the things they talk about is looking for good ways to end the session. So the very shortest answer that I could have given you at the beginning is towards the end of the episode, I look for a dramatic moment and end it there, or I help move you towards dramatic moments. So if y'all recall the episode before that, right, you were at dinner with Devrin, and you know the dinner itself, wasn't high stakes. It was fun, but it wasn't like that high stakes. But we also had, we had this villain, the Hound, who was there, as y'all know now, who was there in Erosa. And the Hound is looking, or seems to be looking, for one of you. And I decided it would be a good ending if at dinner the Hound came close and was looking and scratching and smelling as it searched for Kit. Um, and as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, your breath freezes and we end. Or last time, right? We had the fight, and at the moment that the Hound disappeared into the darkness, right? Like what we're right around the end time. I'm like, that's the moment, right? So start looking to end the session around, whatever agreed time you have. Start looking for ways to end the session, or the time to end the session, because ending it with everybody excited is great, right? And leaves your players wanting more, right? And leaves you excited for the next session, right? Like, another good book I have in here is the Lazy Dungeon Master's Guide to Prep, or whatever. I think it's just the Lazy Dungeon Master's Guide. One of the things that he tries to really push on is start every session with a strong start, and they put that out in the ICRPG book too. Start with something exciting to get people into the show, or into the game. And if you end on a cliffhanger, you necessarily have a strong start. So,
I think it says a lot about you as a dungeon master, as a GM, that we can end mid combat. That's often advice that you get, especially for newer dungeon masters, is like, don't end mid combat. Try to wrap up the combat. And we end in combat all the time, and I love it. And I think that one of the things that you do well, and one of the things that goes well in our games, is that combat isn't just let me go through the motions, check my boxes that I use my action, movement, bonus action. Okay, next, your turn. Okay, did you use, this, next, your turn. That there's such a narrative going on that there are cliffhanger moments. You don't get cliffhanger moments when you're just checking off the boxes. So that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed, is those mid-combat tense endings where you're like, oh, I just want one more turn, and you leave me wanting more, and that's perfect.
it's nice of you to say. Funny, when I started DMing, I didn't like I just had no idea what I was doing, right? And so I didn't know that you shouldn't stop in the middle of combat, right? I've never even heard that. So I try and stop if I'm going to stop at the top of a round. But yeah, like if you're, I try and make sure combat's also driving a narrative, whatever the narrative is. I try and make sure that it's driving a narrative. So then, they're like little plot twists, like the Hound disappearing in the darkness is a plot twist, right? So
I
like
wanted to
that.
say too that, like, talking about combat, I really have enjoyed the round recaps that you've been doing. Those are just awesome. So I don't know if you want to like talk about what inspired you to do that, and what those are. But when you started doing those, I was just like, my mind was just like, I was like, whoa, why haven't I always done this in a game? Because it's good.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. This is genuinely the nicest session I've ever done. I was gonna put that out there. But yeah, I stole that from somewhere, but like, if you think about it, right? Like supposedly a round in combat represents 6 seconds of real time, right? Like 6 seconds in which a bunch of things happen. So, but but the way we do it, it's like your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn, right? Like a bunch of things that happen. So if at the end you kind of wrap up, all of this happened in the last 6 seconds, I think it takes your players and it drives them back, into that right headspace, right? And helps frame, again, helps frame the story, right? Because combats are a story, right? Like this guy got fucking killed, right? It's a really big deal, and it shifts the momentum of the fight. And I can point out things that are interesting, right? Like if a fire is spreading, hey, the fire spread during the fight, and if you're slipping in layer actions or something, right? Like great, or if your enemy has a bunch of attacks, like you can go, their unnatural speed or legendary actions, like they're able to do extra things. But if you wrap that up in an end of round recap, like it starts to feel a lot more. It makes it less mechanical and more, visceral. So
Yeah, I think it also too like helps because it's easy when you're in combat, like as a player, to get kind of wrapped up in what am I going to do next? Or just thinking about what you're going to do and then maybe not exactly like catching every little detail that happens. And then at the end of the round, when you do the recap, it just helps me as a player and probably as a viewer too to just kind of picture what happened like more cinematically too, which is really helpful. It's just like, okay, all of this happened, and it helps me prep for the next round as well. But yeah, I've just really enjoyed it. So
I think it's also how we're used to seeing high action scenes in like TV and movies where it'll be a lot of like really quick cuts that are really zoomed in of like a punch flying and a guy getting knocked back or whatever. And that's kind of like the mechanical combat round. But then inevitably in those TVs and movies, the camera pans back and you get to see multiple people lying on the ground or who's still standing, who's, been injured, that sort of thing. And so I feel like the combat round followed by the recap has those like punch, punch, clash, clash, and then zoom out and take stock of what all that meant. And so I love the feel of it.
oh yeah, well, that's great to hear. But I agree entirely, right? It kind of comes back to like still the best DMing advice I ever got. And if you haven't read it, check out like the alexandrian.net. It's incredibly good DMing advice. The guy's also on Twitch, the Alexandrian. Find him on YouTube. Really awesome. I highly recommend you spend some time checking out Justin Alexander if you're interested in DMing at all. But one of the best bits of advice I got, and funny enough, I picked this up on my own running mysteries, which is that, you know, essentially, whether it's in combat, whether it's during an investigation, and we were talking about this just before we came on, like it's really everything makes great sense to you and seems really simple when you're the DM, right? And it's super friggin' complicated and obscure if you're the player, right? So like as the DM, things are when you're DMing, if you're worried that things are going to be too obvious to your players, you are either really lucky in that you have some like semi-prescient players, lucky or unlucky, whatever. You're in a very strange place because most players just it's hard for them because they are only seeing the little tidbits of the world that you give them, right? So the round recap, back to this, is a way to give important information as a make it glaring to your players. Same thing actually I use session recaps for is I try and remind you all of the what I thought were relevant things from the last session just to try and jam that in. And long story short, if you're running a mystery, if you're running combat, if you're running whatever, right? Like give your players good information and give it to them. If you're worried about giving too much information, just give it in a show don't tell style way. Where you don't say the troll regenerates. You can say you see the wounds on the troll begin to close. Right? Like that's you know, that's useful that's useful information that you're sharing to them, and it's not like so it's obvious, but it's not so obvious that they'll necessarily all catch it, right?
Yeah, as a player, I would rather know what's going on than not know what the heck is going on at all. So, like, I've had games where I just feel like I don't know what's going on at all, and it's not fun because you don't like it's more fun when you feel like you're figuring something out or you're solving something. So, yeah. And most of the time, like, we were talking about this before, but like we're gonna make it more complicated than it needs to be as players.
100%. Absolutely.
So even if you make it glaringly obvious to us, like we're gonna try to overcomplicate it. But it's gonna feel really cool and really good for us when we have that aha moment because you've laid out the clues and the breadcrumbs, and we're like, oh yeah, yeah, we should have seen that coming. But it makes it more satisfying for sure.
So
I'm glad to hear that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
that raises my next question is I'll use the example of Calamity, but I'm sure there's other examples. So when the players start to get runaway paranoia, or they start to harp on something that may or may not even be intended. Calamity's this super cool person. We all really love her. And then we're like, wait, we like her too much. There might be something wrong. We get paranoid. Does that change how you play Calamity at that point? Does that, and it doesn't have to be necessarily, if spoilers, I don't want any spoilers. So just like, how does the players interacting or changing or acting in a way you don't expect, how does that change how you play that aspect going forward?
That's a really cool question. I I do my best at all times to play all the NPCs in a way that's faithful to them, right? Because like I think the game's fun. I think the game's like I've played in games where I was like, okay, this is in spite of the fact that we're playing with swords and sorcery and elves and all these other things, right? Like I like to think that my NPCs all behave in real ways and my world behaves in a reasonable fashion, right? So the NPCs, I'm always true to them, right? Like Devrin. Devrin really wanted you to kidnap that guy, but Devrin didn't want to. He didn't want to give you the full story because he doesn't trust you, right? And whatever, right? Like he has his own motivations there. I think at this point, it's not a spoiler to say y'all are being manipulated a little bit there,
Sure.
right? Um, but take Calamity, right? Like she has her own motivations and her own agenda, so she operates when she sees y'all behaving a certain way, she operates in a way that is faithful to who she is, like including her weaknesses and her strengths and according to her goals. Right, and I try and always play her in that way. Now, my NPCs, and my DMing style is opportunistic, right? So if I see y'all fixated on something and I didn't plan for it to be super interesting or whatever, right? If it seems like this might be really cool, right? As long as it fits with the logic of the scene and with the faction and the NPCs involved, then why not? Like suddenly this thing that y'all are fixated on maybe does become more important, right? Or if y'all are really going after something and it's not relevant, right? Like have you roll like an investigative check. Like, hey, listen, you're sure this is a dead end, right? Like you get some info positive this doesn't work. Great, right? But don't I guess going back, right? Like going a little bit back to the previous thing, right? Like do your best to give your players as much information as you can, but feed it in a drip format, right? So always be giving players information, but kind of give them one piece at a time, right? So that they're slowly building up more of the world and that they're not frustrated. Because there's nothing worse than like looking and trying and like this doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. And you're like, bro, like, well, what the fuck does work then? Like, what avenue should I go down? Right. So finding lots of ways, like having a big list of clues to like give them, and like whether it's a mystery or not, like everything's a mystery, right? Like going back to Devrin and where you found him, you know, he sent you after that tiefling, and there was no well, like I think we've got Bree watching and maybe some other folks that watch the prep session, right? Like I think it was great for the folks that watch the prep session to watch y'all like trying to figure out what the deal was with this tiefling, and he had all these theories about who he's related to, this, that, and the other thing, and and at the end of the day, y'all just kind of came in, and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, that's my son," you know, and "Oh yeah, dad's upstairs with you know with some lady," right? Yeah, the voices are a lot of fun. Um, but yeah, the you know keep dripping every time you'll interacted with that tiefling or someone around it, you got a drip of info, right? You know, hey, he's actually pretty cool. He's shy. He's sad. He's scared about his dad. Dad's upstairs. There's the what was it, Paula? What was your acronym for Larry?
Very huge
Oh,
human or
like a
something like
very
that.
large human or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very large human. I love that. Yeah. So you got the VLH coming down the stairs, right? And and it just kind of kept going that way. So I forgot your original question, Josh. So that's a lot to say. I forgot your original question. Sorry.
No, that's good, and it actually brings up something that maybe Paula can talk more about. But I can say that personally, that idea of drip feeding information as a player playing on a streamed game, that's something that's new to me. In that most of the time when I sit down at a table, everybody's like, "All right, here's my character, here's their backstory in more detail than will ever be relevant," right? And it's fun because everyone's excited about their characters. With this game, especially having splitting up into 2 and 2 and not knowing everybody's character until session 5, right, when we all meet. So Paula, how did you drip feed information about Kit both to Mike and I, as the players, and then also to the audience? Because I think there was more drip feeding done because it's a streamed game and there's people at home that want to learn these characters. So how do you drip feed bits about Kit?
Oh man, that's I feel like that's something that I don't really do intentionally. So maybe I should start doing it more intentionally. But with Kit, it's been more so that she there's just a lot happening to her right now early in this game, and just by nature of what's happening to her and by nature of her character, she's keeping secrets. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of, she doesn't want people to know about her because she's being hunted. But at the same time, she's close to Taya's character, Essie. And so I think little bits come out because, when they're having their scenes together, which I really, really liked that concept of having the two pairs that have a history with each other. Because I think just by having that, when we do get to have those scenes together, little bits of information come out that way. And like I said, it wasn't really something that I did intentionally, but I think Jason maybe had this in mind. And that's just how it's played out. And I think it's been really great. And I also just think it's really cool for role play to have two characters that have a history with each other. And we did this off stream, but we had sessions. Taya and I initially did it without Jason. Even just when we were creating our characters, we just kind of did an impromptu role play session on Discord. We just got together and we said, okay, here's our characters and this is how they meet, and this is them like interacting. And it was really fun and a really great way to build the rapport between us and like our characters, so that it is a little bit more, I think, convincing when we're playing on stream, because we do have a little bit of history. And we do have like a few little inside jokes already, and things that adventures that we've had. We did the contest together, and that was a bonding moment for us, and that wasn't streamed. And so yeah, anyway, all of that to say, I think that just by the nature of the way that Jason set the game up, it's very conducive to us showing these things about our characters, and it's been very fun to play.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So Josh, before you move on, I need to hear your answer to that. So sorry, go ahead and say your thing, but I need you to answer the same question. So.
Sure. And yeah, I was just going to say like little tidbits that the audience learns about Kit, stuff that maybe Zagrin doesn't even know, but just because I've seen episode 1 and 2, like when Kit writes in thieves' cants and it's symbols, and we find out that Kit can't read, like that tells me so much about Kit by that one little detail. That A, she can speak common, but she can't write it. And B, that she writes in thieves' cants tells me so much. And then when you think about, okay, who is she writing to? Where is she leaving that message? It's like, that doesn't answer all my questions, but it tells me something, and it answers some questions, and it raises way more interesting questions that we're slowly getting answers to as we learn more and more about her. Yeah, I think that my answer to how do I drip feed, or how has that been different, is it helps absolutely that Mike and I role played off screen. Like that was huge. And that we talked about assembling this caravan, and then we start, the first scene of us is in the caravan being attacked. So having backstory before the first screened moment and starting kind of in medias res, where we're in the heat of the moment, helped that a lot. My other answer is a lot of times I don't know a lot about my characters until it becomes time to see something on screen, and then I just make a choice and stick with it. That it's easy to drip feed when I'm drip feeding to myself at the same time as everybody else. So that's my cheat, is at least how I play my characters, I like to have right now, what are they doing? What are their goals and why? But I like to fill in the blanks as they become necessary. But as I build that, I stick with that choice, commit to that choice. It's canon, it's locked in. And then oftentimes in the same way that I was mentioning that, like, okay, Kit writes in thieves' cant, and that raises more interesting questions. Once I make a choice about Zagrin or any character I'm playing, I'm going to think about what other things does this imply? Now that I know this, what does that mean? And then you start to fill in other spots. And then when they become relevant, you drop that little bit of lore about your character. Now you're drip feeding, because it doesn't mean I'm making everything up on the spot. It means I'm making up some things on the spot and then filling in a lot of blanks once that's filled in. So that's more my style.
Allowing the natural implications of your choices to build out a character in a more like 3-dimensional fashion, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's the same for Kit. Like what you were saying about the thieves' cant thing, that didn't happen I mean, that happened in the moment, right? It was like something that I thought about when Jason said, "Hey, write this note," and then I was like, I don't think she would have learned to write, like, and I think that thieves' cant makes more sense for her character. And so, yeah, I think it's really, really cool to create those things in the moment, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that raises to me is that if you don't have everything filled out and you're trying to fill things in the moment, how do you know, when do you decide to make a character decision? And that can go for you as well, Jason. Like, when do you decide, okay, I'm comfortable locking something into canon versus let me feel this out, or give a wishy-washy response so I can try to think of it later? Like, how do you know when you feel comfortable committing to something?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I try to never make wishy-washy decisions, right? Like you're the especially if you're the DM or GM, whatever, right? Like just always commit. I learned this in the army. For the best bit of like not the best bit, but a great bit of advice I got in the army was go wrong, stay wrong. And concept of you know just really be friggin' decisive and see where that gets you. Um, I I like to just make so I do a lot of prep. I'll be candid, right? And some of the folks who are watching can talk to you about that. I do a lot of prep. I really enjoy prepping, and I every one of my NPCs, like I've got a thing written down like on this board behind me. Every NPC, they've got a name, a goal, some traits, some characteristics, some secrets, maybe some lore that they can tell you, and then a faction, right? And like once I know that kind of stuff about them, it's really easy to decide, oh, okay, like where did you grow up? Well, okay, so they're a crime syndicate person, right? So they grew up in a city. Um, and that's what led them to whatever. Um, I'm trying to see if I answered your question now. How do I make the decisions? How do I know when? I always make the definitive commitment about where they are, right? And let it go because it's okay. Like the world, going back to that earlier thing about trying to make the world feel real, even though it's very fake. Like the real world is full of nonsense all the time, right? People do contradictory or backwards or self-harming things like on a regular basis, right? Like so your characters, your NPCs can do that kind of stuff. They can be stupid, they can make mistakes, they can do all this stuff. So and because you're the GM, they're disposable, right? There's a lot of NPC. Everyone, not Calamity. Calamity's not this world, but you know,
Too important to the
NPCs are
plot.
too important to my heart, man. Like no, I'm kidding. Y'all can do whatever you want, but yeah, I think that's kind of where I go. One thing I've been thinking a lot about the way y'all build characters, and some I've talked to you all about. I know at least a little, right? So I really love that drip feed method of storytelling, and I love how natural it seems to be for every one of you to do this by letting little bits of story get out, one piece of a time. Like how many? I guess I spend a lot of time on D&D Reddit, but how many times? Have you seen people talk about, oh, I'm trying to share this bit of my lore, but my players don't care, or I wrote this backstory and like people aren't engaging with it, right? Like, well, like almost nobody wants you to just hand them a whole story, right? But when you hear that Kit can't write and only writes thieves can't, every one of us, I'm pretty sure, if you're watching, I'm pretty sure that worked for you too. Right? Every one of us was like, "Ooh, I wonder why," and then you get like a little bit more and a little bit more. So if you're telling, whether you're making it up or whether you're deciding deliberately to release it at that pace, right? Like giving those tidbits is what does it. Like Calamity, right? Like remember when Essie the went into Calamity's tent and she like bolted up and grabbed a knife, right? Like ask a lot of questions, right? Like who does that? Who just bolts up and like knife, right? Well, somebody that's like really on edge, but like she's really nice at the same time. So like, where's that? Like, what's
I
happening
think
here?
I think about when Essie noticed Calamity's tattoo and knew a little bit about that, the history behind it. Suddenly, the very next words out of Essie's mouth are, tell me more about that, Calamity. Like I'm now asking a bunch of questions. And you're right. Had Calamity introduced herself by being like, "Hi, I was in a prison camp. My name's Calamity." Suddenly, we're like, "Whoa, you're not cool. We don't want to hang out with you." Like that's a lot of just like dumping on me of this crazy traumatic backstory. When you notice the clue, now you're curious and now you ask. So we were interested because of that small little clue and what Essie knew. And we asked, and that's way different than if it's just told to us up front, because that gives a way different impression.
And it's how I feel about y'all's backstories, right? The way you reveal things to each other the way you reveal things to each other through these organic conversations is just like it's my favorite thing. I just sit there and I watch y'all like doing this. I'm like, oh my god, this is great. Like, what's gonna happen? That chess scene, like that scene where Josh, you were playing Zagrin and Essie, or Taya was playing Essie, and you're talking about this absolutely bonkers shit that Saleas had just done. And like you were just kind of there was tension, there was a little bit about who y'all are, right? Not like your backstory, right? But who you are. And like once I start to care about who Zagrin is, who Essie is, I care about Zagrin's backstory in a way that I wouldn't, if I didn't like care about him to begin with.
So I think this brings up another interesting point of some of those tense role play moments. Zagrin and Kit haven't had a whole lot of interaction, but the most interaction they had was when Zagrin got very accusatory towards Kit. Like their interactions have now been either neutral or somewhat hostile. So what was that like for you, Paula, when Zagrin keeps pointing the finger and you're playing Kit who feels super guilty, and then Zagrin's laying into it, being like, "You're a liability. Like, why are we with you?"
Yeah, I mean, it felt in the moment like not in a bad way for you to you, Josh, but like I felt sad. I felt so emotional because Kit agrees. Like she feels so guilty, and she's gonna have to deal with this immense guilt from what happened. And yeah, I didn't feel like any of those accusations were unfounded. And then Essie just jumps in to defend Kit, but Kit's just like, no, you're right. Like I should probably just leave the caravan, to not put anyone else in danger. Um, but it was a great moment because I felt like it was very real. Like I felt like it was very realistic. Because Zagrin and Saleus, they have their own set of problems, right? And this is just an added complication. So I really felt like that was a great moment that felt like it actually, would happen. Um, but it'll be interesting to see how these two characters uh, progress with their relationship going forward, because well, they're so different anyway. I feel like Kit and Saleus have actually kind of a lot in common, and so they already have this rapport, this kind of little relationship going on. But Zagrin and Kit come from vastly different worlds, so um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love the parallels between Zagrin Essie and then Saleus Kit. And then when you start mixing and matching those combinations, you get a lot of really cool interactions going on, and a lot of spots where, oh, we're not so different, you and I, versus I don't understand your life. Like it just doesn't compute. I don't have any reference for that. And you get all sorts of different pieces of that with the different combination with the four of us. And that's been a lot. That's been a lot of fun to explore. Um,
I actually have
so
a question for both of you, if y'all don't mind.
yeah, go for it.
So we talked about this a little bit, right? About games we've played that have felt adversarial, or like there was some, you know, like either that you were getting, not enough information, or the world didn't feel like the world felt like it moved in a arbitrary fashion sometimes, right? Or things like that. Or even that the games have felt adversarial, right? Like that the game master's not like rooting for you, right? And like to be clear, we're in a show called Heroes Die, and like I am like my enemies always try and kill the characters, right? Like they are determined, they are serious, right? And like when they get into these life or death fights, like they want to win, right? But I'd ask, so like in this game, just because I have y'all all now, this is recorded. What do you think? How do you? What what has happened from a DM GM standpoint that has left you feeling like you're on solid ground, and that you know we are, instead of the fact that I am actively working to trick, surprise, and kill you, that we're on the same team? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, and the one of the spots that pops out to me is when Seleus and Zagran were in the Underdark, and there were the little mushroom people, and they were like offering us the mushroom, and it was pretty clear that there was something spooky going on. And Seleus and Zagran just walk right through the middle and off to the other side, and then just go about their day. And the fact that the mushrooms, something I'm confident something would have happened had we engaged with the mushrooms, right? But
It's
the
true.
fact that we were
Yes.
able, right, exactly. But the fact that we were able to say, no, we don't want to deal with this. We have our own stuff. We're not getting distracted. You're spooky. And it wasn't in any way I felt like, oh, they're going to, they're going to attack if we don't interact, is what I assumed would happen. And when they didn't, I felt like, okay, I don't have to engage with parts of the world that my character doesn't want to. And it doesn't mean that they're able to walk through everything scot-free, but not that these mushrooms were waiting for Zagran and Seleus because that's where their whole existence was, right? They were created to interact with us. It felt much more that they were just there and they were also doing their own things, and our paths happened to cross. And when that moment happened, it's like, okay, I'm not being railroaded, first of all. And it means I need to explore, because that means that not only will I dodge danger if I don't interact with things, I might miss out on cool interactions too. So now as a player, I want to interact with things so I don't miss out on cool moments. So as a player, that had a lot of impact on me, and said, all right, we're on the same page here. We're in this world of best left buried. I'm this character. You're these people. What can we do with this? What kind of story can we tell? So that's when that moment was cemented in my mind.
That's
Yeah.
really cool to hear. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No, I was gonna agree with all of that and say, I mean, gameplay. There are definitely a lot of examples in gameplay, but I think a huge part of it is what happens, when we're not playing, like what happens behind the scenes, I guess, like all of the discussion that we have together, like one-on-one with you, Jason, just about what's going on with our characters. And if we're happy, if we're comfortable with where we're going and our goals, I think all of that makes me feel like you're going to give us opportunities in game to kind of fulfill some of the, or work towards some of these goals that we have as players. And so that's the opposite of an adversarial relationship. Like, you are working behind the scenes to make sure that we have all the opportunities that we need to do the things that we want to do with our characters. And so I think that's great, because it's something that you don't get with a lot of games. And I think it's really important, especially when you're very when role play and like character building and storytelling is something that you enjoy, which for me it's like everything. It's really important to talk about these things. And going back to like the character stuff and like the drip feed and like making character choices in game, I think and I think you mentioned this, Josh, like having some just larger character goals in mind and in place. If you have those like pillars, then you can fill in more of the details without without going off in a weird direction, you're still being true to your character because you have these goals, these larger overarching themes in your mind, and that you've discussed them with the DM, and so you're on the same page. But it's something that I really appreciate about you, Jason, and about this game, is just all of the discussion that we have, you know, one-on-one and not during the game. It's been really great, and it's something that I wish that more of my games have had in the past, because I think it does a lot for just making it an enjoyable experience.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, one of the things, I mean, I don't know what you guys talk about one-on-one, because that's what one-on-one means. But I like that during those discussions, it's about the character and like, where are they going? But it's not, hey, let's prescript this event that's going to happen. It's never like, I don't leave those conversations knowing anything more about what's going to happen next. It's all about what has already happened, or more often than not, what is happening right now. And that's good, because I've also played in games where people are messaging the DM and say, hey, can you make this happen so I can do this with my character, and then this can happen. And now you're kind of just telling your own little story and holding everybody else at the table hostage while you tell your story. And I feel like it's been much more, it's never about events, it's about the character. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, again, thanks. This is super, super nice to go through. But you know, it brings me to a point that so we had a great chat from Mad Dog, who was talking about, you know, growth essentially. And, you know, one of the things that I do, and now y'all have both alluded to this. One of the things I do, I try and do with all the characters or all the players, is have one-on-one sessions and talk about people's characters, and like ask just a couple sessions like, hey, are you having fun? Because like that's important. How do you like the story so far? You know, what are things that you've really enjoyed? What are some things that, you know, you'd like to see more of or less of, whatever. Another one I do is I really talk about character development, right? Because in general, stories are like you start with some imperfect knowledge, but a goal. You move to try and get that goal, but there's something in the way that keeps you from getting it. Then you overcome that problem, you know, and there's some sort of consequence related to it. And, you know, maybe you act with imperfect knowledge, struggle, get full knowledge, and then resolve the thing. Right. But along the way, it's like a good story if you're different at the end than you're at the beginning, right? So I love to sit down with all of you and be like, hey, how do you want this person to evolve? How do you want their story to go? And then I look for moments that are going to allow you to, you know, one, allow your characters to shine mechanically. Because it's one thing to look at people's character sheets and make sure that they're in a situation where they can use some of their cool abilities. But another one is see how do you, you know, the human being piloting this character, like how do you want your character to shine? And then put those scenes in there. And it's like a killer way to build trust. Like do it for people a couple times. They're gonna be like, yo, this guy's, you know, we're on the same page. So if he's doing something weird, like I get a little bit of whatever, uh, slack, right? But then too, right, you get to make sure that people have that growth arc settled, right? And that way people don't feel the need to like shoehorn their backstory so much. Because it always bugs me when people try and put out too much backstory at once, right? Like in a inorganic way. And making sure that people trust that they're going to get to do it organically can really help.
Yeah, and at least my favorite way to play is the backstory should should help flavor decisions that the character makes, but we're telling this story, not the backstory, right? I'm more interested in what's happening next, not what Zagranardi did, except when something that happened in his past is going to help flavor or determine what decision he's going to make.
Well, that's
Um,
that's exactly it though, right? Like that's for me like what a good backstory does, right? Is it allows you to show who you were by seeing how that impacts who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like that scene that we had where you were in the office of Anna, the forger, right? And suddenly you came alive, and you're like, okay, I get it. Favor for a favor in order to wield the political influence in this town, right? And Zagrin has these implications of the politics because he's got this background. But so we're doing both, right? We're telling the story of
Mhm.
Zagrin the diplomat, and we're telling the story of Zagrin now dealing with this conflict. And I love that. I love that combination. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Josh.
No, that's pretty much exactly what I was saying. Is that I always hope that the game I'm playing tells a better story than I wrote for a backstory, because if otherwise, I'm seeing the less interesting part of this character I'm playing. Right? Like if I'm focusing so much on the backstory, that means that my character is a has-been because the cool stuff already happened. Right? I want to see this character's rise to, what's the coolest thing that happened in this character's life. And if I write a really intricate backstory, now I have a lot of pressure to live up to, because whatever I do on in the game on screen has to be more interesting than that, right? So that's my style. Do you have anything to add on that, Paula? Kit's backstory versus her now.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think backstory is context, right? It's something to help you with the context for your character, to play your character in a real kind of human way. But yeah, it's not the story that we're telling now. I mean, your character's history might tie into the story that's happening now, but sitting around and trying to, you know, just have an expose on your past is less interesting, I think. But I do love a good backstory. I do like going into detail, but again, it's for context. It's not really you know, for the gameplay. But
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? Because we're playing a game, right? We're playing a Dungeons and Dragons game, and we're like that's a big part of what we do in the show. But we're also telling a story, right? And I love like what this format gives you. So actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to take a little detour and talk about, you know, the broader Best Left Buried story and some of the tools that we're using to tell it. How does that sound?
Yeah.
All right. So this is just a quick plug for those of you that are watching. We're building out this little mini series, right? So we want to get a couple episodes done in like a small arc that will happen, in time with the events of this story, right? Like in time with the events of the Best Left Buried story, but like tell some of what you're not seeing, right? Oop, so sorry about that. So if you probably know, but just to recap, right? What we have is four characters who have gone on a journey. Two of them started in the city of Zadash, and two of them started in the city of Rosanna, right? In the Kryn dynasty. They've all met up together at the crossroads, and they're going all together up to this entirely different kingdom that none of them have ever been to, Uthadern, however you say it. And their goal is to go from there up to this like frozen island where this flying city has crashed in the ground. So it's like this bonkers magic place, and there's like a little archaeological gold rush going on there right now. And so they're moving, right? But this whole story that we've told is just them traveling across the world and setting up some seeds that can come back in a later act and provide you know, some cool story. And we thought it'd be really neat to, you know, build a little mini arc. So I guess let me turn this into a question, right? So Josh and Paula, you have a sense for what story we've told already, obviously, and you have a sense for what we're thinking in this mini arc. So how do you feel about the idea of doing something like that, like a little mini arc that gives some amount of the story for what's going on without having your characters play through it directly?
I love that idea. And I'm very excited for it. I think that the world is really cool, and I don't have a lot of Wildmount familiarity. I've done most of my reading up on it for this game, but there's a lot of cool things that are happening that have nothing to do with the four of us. I mean, there's a whole war started, and nobody that we've encountered really seems to know why. Like, we've heard bits and pieces, but it's just tensions are high, right? So there's that whole aspect. There's all the different religious aspects, and I've gotten to explore some of that with Zagrin, and but then there's artifacts related to that, and there's just so many cool threads that aren't hyper relevant to what our characters' goals are, but as a player, I definitely want to know more about them. And so, yeah, I think that getting to see the world through a different set of eyes is interesting. And we've never really stated it, I don't think, on stream, but even just the fact that Heroes of Windgrove takes place in the same Wildmount, right? Like, we're getting to see that whole aspect of what's happening in that area. And Zagrin, Nessie, Kit, and Saleus have no interest or concern with that, but it still helps paint the world it's a dangerous place. There's a lot of stuff happening. Money talks, right? Like, that's something that's really a common thread that goes through both games. And so getting to explore what that means in a different context is super exciting.
Yeah,
Killer.
I agree that just having more context about the world is going to just help us tell a better, richer, more interesting story, I think. And it's with such an interesting world, it would be easy to try and just info dump a bunch of, this is what's happening in the world. But I don't know about other people, but whenever there's like a massive lore or info dump, it's hard for me to retain any information. It's just like, I don't know. But if it's told in such a way, like in a more character driven way with different characters, then obviously it's a lot more interesting and fun to watch. And so I like that about the little mini arc that we're doing. Also, just another opportunity to play a new character in this very cool world, in a kind of like very high stakes, but also very low stakes scenario, because, we're only playing for, I don't know however many episodes we're going to do, just a handful of episodes, but anything can happen. And we may, I don't know, we may have some interesting things that happen that help us live up to the name of our show. But yeah, I'm excited to do it. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and it'll help me too, because kind of like Josh, like, I don't have a ton of information about Wildmount, and just reading the books is not the most fun way to get the information for me either. So playing it and like experiencing the world is always much more interesting.
Yeah, glad to hear you. Glad to hear you both say that. Yeah, lore dumps are, you know, not not interesting, right? Like, fundamentally, like, I spend a lot of time reading these settings books. One, to get a sense of what is this world before I start making it mine, right? I want to get a sense of what all is written about it, right? What all is known about that thing. But yeah, I don't find that to be a useful thing. Like, it's one thing if you're going to have a character tell a story about something, right? But one, they have to tell it as a story, not fact. Like, I try not to give players any facts. If you're on the prep session, you'll get the facts, right? So, plug, by the way, on Wednesdays at 7 Central Time, we tend to do prep sessions, and periodically also at other times we do prep sessions because I like to stream that because it's really fun, right? But there you'll get facts. But I try not to give facts to people that are in game because, well, for a lot of reasons, including that, like, I like to be able to change things if I want to, or change the facts. And two, like, you think about whatever, think about any topic that you get real world information on. You rarely have the 100% solid facts on it. Like I was just reading something the other day, like Paul Revere, like basically got only a very short distance and then arrested, and then like a bunch of other people spread the message. I don't really remember it a lot about Paul Revere, but I think he was the guy on the horse yelling that the British were coming. Anyway, turns out it was a bunch
Hashtag
of folks.
horse facts.
Oh, mother!
We gotta have them in every single session that we do. At least one horse fact.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's why I don't like to give facts, because facts are often bullshit, and not the concept of facts, but I mean, like, people often don't have absolute truth at their fingertips, right? So I don't like to give players, oh yeah, here's the absolute truth about this thing. No, don't ever do that, right? Like give people, okay, so this is what you hear, and they're like, oh shit, like what's going on? You know,
Well, there's
it leaves
always a
them.
point of view. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
There's always a
please.
point of view behind, any information, right? And so depending on who's talking, it could be framed in a totally different light. And I think that just makes the world more real and more interesting also. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think one of my pet peeves in D&D or any TTRP in general is also when rumors are always fact. Is a lot of DMs will try to skirt that and say, "Oh, I'm not giving a fact. You heard a rumor that a dragon is running that inn." And then as a player, I'm like, "Okay, so a dragon's running that inn. You didn't say it was a fact, but you imply it so heavily, or I have no reason to doubt it to the point where your rumors are always fact, then you're just giving me facts." And I like that people have imperfect information and rumors are sometimes just rumors.
Or like that again, go back to Devon just fucking straight up lying to you, right? About what he
Yes.
wanted you. He told you the truth about what he wanted you to do, but he lied about his motivation for doing the thing, right? Like he would have rewarded you. I assume he will reward you if you do the thing, and I imagine you'll make an enemy of him by not doing the thing. This is my guess. I won't know until I have to think it through as Devon. Um, but you get the point, right? Also, yeah, have your NPCs blatantly lie to characters, but in like a not, what's the right way to say this? Like I think it was really important to have an NPC lie to you all, right? And I try and do that early in games, is have NPCs be wrong or lie, right? But do it in a way that's easily provable and easily validated, right? And not like, oh, here's a bunch of red herrings about whether or not, this kid was really whatever, some fancy thief. But it was like really obvious as soon as you talk to him that he was not whoever Devon said he was, right? And then you got the full story and you're like, oh, okay, this is definitely why. Like, why Devon wanted you to kidnap that kid, right?
Yes.
Right? Like,
Exactly.
no two ways about it. And I think that's valuable. But sorry, I got sidetracked because what I really wanted to ask you too was another question. And I see this again a lot when people talk about D&D is trust. Like, trust is so friggin' important, right? So one of the things that we do in this mini arc, or one of the things we're going to do in this mini arc, is we're going to give you those of you that are playing, we're going to give you information that your characters don't have access to. And like Josh and Paula, like each of you watched the sessions that the other played in that y'all weren't there for. So you have access to this info in a real sense that your characters don't have access to. You're going to get access to info through this mini arc about a real and emerging threat that you're leaving behind. So how do you feel as players getting that kind of stuff? Like, do you feel comfortable with it? Do you like it? Do you feel like it's really hard to, separate out the person know versus where's your character know? Where's that kind of sit?
I love having information my character doesn't, because it's one of the things that TTRPGs offer that you don't really get in much other media, is that I can be both a participant and an audience member at the same time. And what that unlocks is I can experience dramatic irony that I'm participating in. And I mean, dramatic irony is something that like Shakespeare revolutionized, and now he's like the great, right? Like he's held up on this pedestal because it's such a good tool. And it's so cool when the audience knows something that the characters don't. And that tension builds, and being able to be both the audience member and the participant in that is a crazy experience that you just can't get in pretty much any other way. I haven't found a way to really recreate that. So I like, and because of that, I don't want to spoil it. The second my character knows something that I, the player, know, I've shot that moment in the foot, and it's no longer there, and I've ruined it. So to keep that feeling alive is the biggest motivation to not metagame, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same. And I love drama. So in game, not in real life. So I think that it's like you said, like it's a huge disincentive to metagame. Like metagaming to me, like I would never even want to metagame because it's I don't know, it's just not fun for me. It's D&D isn't about like winning or doing a good job. It's about the story, and anytime that like something bad happens or something surprising happens, that just makes it for a better and more interesting and more fun story. So, like rolling a nat one, or, messing something up, or, failing as a character is always going to be more interesting, in my opinion, than like having some information ahead of time. And I don't know. I don't even know why you would want to do that. But like Josh said, it is really cool, and something that I've never been able to experience before is watching the game like as an audience member. I've never been able to go back and watch games that I've played in until now, and it's so fun. Like it's really incredible. Also, I'm really bad at taking notes, so being able to go back and watch the games is just like I pick up on so many like different things that I didn't pick up on when I was playing. But yeah, metagaming, I don't really worry about it too much because it's not ever a temptation for me to take information and like use it to my advantage. And I think it does make things more interesting as a viewer of the show. So.
Yeah, the idea of winning D&D is always really funny to me. Like,
No.
I mean, again, the name of this show is Heroes Die, right? Like, we're okay if we roll ones because we're
Exactly.
interested to see what blaze of glory these characters might go down in. And yeah, when I was making that one shot fits all RPG available on our Patreon as a plug. But I wrote in there, like the last paragraph is, if at any time you want to just say, I win, you win, right? Like if that's what's important to you, you can just do that, and we can just skip all this and you can just say, I win. Because yeah, if you wanted to cheat at D&D, it's especially the way we play, right? Like it'd be so easy for me to roll above 10 every single time and no one would ever know. But like at that point, what am I doing with my time, right? Like what that's not interesting or fun at all to me.
It's part, and I think a lot of this goes to the credit. And I just want to put this out there, folks. If you're watching this and you like it at all, one, we've got little buttons for like follow and things like that. I saw Mad Dog. You followed us. Thank you very much for that. Anybody else that's feeling like it, please press the little button. It makes a big impact. But the reason we get this game is because we have Paula who really diligently, you know, looked for the cast, sorted through internet strangers, and decided to put this together, right? And kind of built this thing for us, right? And so, the I think about this sometimes because I do spend a lot of time. So so I stopped using social media almost entirely. So all I have left is Reddit, and I use Reddit a lot. And I see all these like what seem like very strange discussions from DMs who have all these concerns about metagaming or power gaming or all this other stuff. Like when we rolled stats. Like when we rolled stats and picked this, right? So I have a stat generation method that I prefer, right? Which is roll stats, and if you're happy with your rolls, great. And if you're not happy, change them. like roll again, like go nuts. Like I don't care at all. And like I was like, well, just make sure that you have some strengths and some weaknesses for your character, right? And like figure that, and I can just trust that the people that I'm playing with are trying to make interesting characters, not make the best characters, right? And the same's true for the metagaming, right? Like I feel so lucky that I can just, I don't tell you things because I don't want to ruin your ability to organically react to things as your characters in the moment, because that's like robbing you of the story. That's robbing everybody. It's robbing everybody of some really important, what's the right word, of a really important experience, right? Which is those genuine reactions. But, like, that's it. Like, that's the only reason that y'all don't know who the ultimate villain is, or, like, what's going on here or there, right? Is because I don't want you to, like, lose stuff, and I feel very lucky that I get to just trust the people I play with, right? And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you're not only would we have access to like information, but if we really wanted to, your prep streams are available on the internet publicly, right? Like we could literally peek into the mind of a DM, but I have zero interest in doing that. Like
Yeah,
I want our
absolutely
numbers
not.
to be up, so I'll watch, but I'm gonna be muted and not looking because I I want to play. I want to find out what happens next.
Yeah, like having those moments of like those jaw-dropping moments are everything. It's fun to have some context, and it's okay to know some things that your character doesn't know. But I love when I'm just totally blindsided by something, and it's just like, holy shit! Like, wow, those are the fun things, and yeah, I wouldn't want to know. So I always drop in and lurk on the prep sessions, but I wouldn't I wouldn't want to know like what's happening in the next session, because I mean that's the fun part, like you're playing in this adventure, and it really has been like a really fun adventure so far.
Yeah, like that moment that you all heard, the butcher the first time
Oh
when
my
he spoke.
gosh.
Because I was
Terrifying.
sitting there preparing that on stream, and I was going through the permutations of his voice, and got some great feedback from the people watching the prep stream. So watch the prep stream, help me make these I won't say awesome, but these interesting character voices. Um,
That was an
but
awesome voice.
That was an
that
awesome
was an
voice.
amazing voice, right? Because he was just so off-putting, and you're looking at like this menacing dude, and he just he's just not able to talk quite right.
All of our faces too, like when you busted out that voice, we're just like, what?
Yes, yes, it is one of my favorite pictures to post on our Twitter. Is our that reaction phase?
Yeah, yeah, it was beautiful. Um, so yeah, anyway, that character creation stuff is really interesting, and then that metagaming stuff is really interesting. The that what do you do to like hold that character's knowledge separate from your knowledge, right? It's like an interesting bit. And there is a balance, right? Because there is some information that just makes it no fun. Like as someone like when I play, I always find it hard, you know, hard not to just be like, okay, what monster is this? Like, okay, well, what is it resistant to or whatever, right? And like it's one thing if it's trolls, but it's another, when it gets into deeper range. So actually I want to talk about something that I just thought about recently. Monsters, right? I think y'all were saying the other day that you really liked the way that experience with the hound went because in a well, actually let me just ask, do y'all know what monster the hound is? Right? Do you have like a token or whatever, like what it is in your
I
brains?
don't, but I think I have an advantage when it comes to this because I am less experienced. I've never DM'd. I'm less experienced in general with Dungeons and Dragons. I've played more TTRPGs that aren't Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't know like all of the monsters. I don't know all of the stats for things. So I have no idea, but I think it makes it a little bit more fun for me because I don't even think about that stuff. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this thing is terrifying. I have no idea what it is, but it's very scary.
Yeah, the book I've probably cracked open the least out of all of the official Wizards of the Coast stuff is the monster manuals. When I DM, a lot of times I'll grab some stat blocks of like appropriately close challenge ratings, and then it's all just made up from there, right? Like I'm just gonna tweak. Okay, it's not a claw, it's a whatever. And as far as like special abilities, those I just make up depending on what the monster is. So I also have no idea what stat block to pull up to make the Hound right now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I really try my best to to describe monsters in that like sense of, you know, what they are to you, right? As opposed to what they are in like a absolute sense. Right. 'Cause-
And just to kind of take back the layer one more, that we were told, you told us very early on that, you know, monsters are not going to be straight out of the monster manual, that they're not going to follow all the rules that characters need to follow, that they are their own entity. And that's how I DM as well. So like I absolutely appreciated that. But it's also good that we can only metagame but so much. Even if you chose something that I did know, I couldn't rely on, all right, it has 14 hit points. So I know I need, it has this armor class, or oh wait, how did it hit me for 10? The max it should have been able to do was 8. Like none of that matters, right? It's
right.
whatever your monster is.
Right. Yeah, that's one of my hard rules. Oh, I'm sorry, Paula. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, it's not really like knocking those kinds of people who want to play that way. I know that that's a whole different kind of play style where you totally optimize your character for mechanics and you're very mechanics focused. That's just never been my play style. Like, I'm not really great with math or like creating the best character mechanically anyway. So I probably just wouldn't have fun playing that way. And yeah, it's just a totally different play style. I think what we're trying to do is focus more on the story and even thinking about those things like, oh, what is this monster's like hit points or something like that. I think even having those thoughts in gameplay would just take you out of the story. But yeah, it's just a different style.
Yeah, like a dungeon crawl is all about mechanics a lot of times, where your characters are lucky if they have a last name. And that's fun. It's just a different game at that point, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that style. And like to be clear, like when I make my characters, right? Like I don't always necessarily optimize for power, but I make good characters. Like they're powerful, they're deadly, they're versatile, right? And I really love that, right? But yeah, for me, it's all about making sure it's like when you play video games, like I pick outfits based on how cool they look as opposed to what is the best one, you know, and I'm okay with that choice.
I've similarly, in, way back when, have made characters that were so focused on how they are a character and not at all focused on combat. And I find that has the opposite problem, where now combat is too dangerous that I can't engage in the more interesting stories. So finding the balance, I think, is important in any game, because has to be a reason that your character is adventuring, A, and B, they have to be capable of actually doing so, or we don't get the story. So, that's Zagran's tough. Like, he wasn't built combat first, but I mean, right now he's at 2 hit points, but most of the time he's pretty ferocious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fun too to play a character that's really good at something, but just not really good at everything, because that's not fun.
That
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
crucial difference, right? Like, and that's the thing I say about you know that's the thing I say about rolling, right? Is my big ask was just make sure you have weaknesses, right? Make sure that there are areas where you're not good too, because I think that's critical. And like, then you'd have, if one character's good at everything, then you lose all the room for everybody else to be really cool and really interesting. And that's just good. Um, all right. Sorry, Josh, did you want to go again?
If you have something, you can go for it. I can pull another topic out though.
Yeah, pull something else out.
So, kind of on that and on that note, how do you like to? And this goes for as a player or as a DM. How do you like to shine the spotlight on your fellow people at the table? That's something I've noticed a lot, and want to give a shout out. I know she's not here now, but like I think Taya, the player, is super good at casting that light towards other people at the table. Not to say, I mean, we all do it a lot, but I just want to give kudos to her because I notice she does it a lot. But how do you like to find ways to bring other people into a scene or shift the spotlight away from your character onto someone else?
Yeah, I totally agree. Taya's the best at that. And I think those little moments, those little one-on-one role play moments are so fun, and I love doing those with Taya. Um, and yeah, just asking questions, I think, is like a really easy but like great way to do that. Just ask another character questions. Just give them the opportunity to uh, share something about their character. And a lot of times, really great, either dramatic or funny moments come out of those. And yeah, those are just really fun.
Yeah, that's great. I do love the way y'all do that, right? I find one of my favorite bits is that the real curiosity y'all have about the NPCs, about the world, and about each other, right? And how friggin' organic it always is. So, Josh, I'd ask you the same question. So, how do you do the spotlight? Because I'll tell you my thing on it because I think about it a lot also.
So I always like to try to picture the scene in my head, not necessarily dramatically, but as a checklist of who is there and what is there, like items and people, and keep that as a checklist kind of in my head. So I'm not very good at picturing things visually, but theater of mind is my preferred style of play. And that's because when I have a list of things, these are all tools I can pick up and add to the scene. They're there already, but I can add them to the actual scene that's playing out. And so picking up a tool that hasn't been used in a while is really fun. So that's like the chess set. I had a chess set on my character sheet that became something. Let me bring that into the scene because I think it would be interesting to see how does this change what's going on. And it's the same thing. My fellow players are tools in the toolbox in the same way of if this person hasn't said something in a while, how does draw, but I know that they're present in the scene. How does drawing that person in change the scene? So a lot of times I will be thinking, okay, but what does Saleus think about this, right? Because his character Mike's great to talk to, but his character is not very vocal, so doesn't insert himself into scenes a lot because that's who his character is. But I'm in an interesting spot of if anybody can draw Saleus out of his shell, it's Zagrin. Because they know each other. So he's constantly someone I like to say, well, what about this or something? And so that's kind of how I like to do it is what's a tool have I not picked up in a while and what would that add to the scene? Let's find out.
The chess scene was like one of my favorite things. And I just loved how everyone, I mean, Kit sadly wasn't part of that scene, but I loved how everyone added onto it. like that was the cool part, right? Like everyone did something with the chess piece and it was just like, holy shit, like just so good, you know? It's like almost one of those you get chills moments. And it wouldn't have happened had you not like brought out the chess set and interacted with it. So I love that checklist that you, because I don't see things that way. I'm more of like a visual, like I try to visualize the scene. So that's something I'll have to try to do.
Yeah, I really like that way of thinking about it. And I also love theater of the mind. So we do, folks, so if you're watching, right, we tend to do more theater of the mind than anything else for a lot of reasons, including, right, like I don't think it's actually that fun for folks that are watching to watch like a board. The other reason is when I do maps, they're often um what's the right word to describe them?
Utilitarian.
Utilitarian.
I don't know what you're talking about, Jason. Your maps are beautiful.
Right.
They impress me every time.
Yeah, so I tend to draw when I do play in person. I draw with a little marker, but when I am doing it on for these folks, I tend to draw with the mouse. So I make general shapes and things. I'm like, all right, there you go. That's the map. You got the point. But yeah, I love theater of the mind for a lot of reasons. One of my favorite things about theater of the mind is something I've really been encouraging all of you to do a lot, right? Which is bring something into the scene, like make something up. That chessboard, jumping over the chair, swinging off the chandelier, like those kind of things. So I'll put some things in there, but I also really love having y'all, you know, add objects to the scene. So it's great to have a list and keep that in your mind, but don't be afraid to put things in there, right? That's part of that broader trust thing we have.
Yeah, I was going to say that that is 100% a testament to trust, because it has to go both ways. As the DM, to say yes, there is a chandelier you can knock down to create a distraction. You have to trust that the player is not going to take advantage of that or completely, start asking for things that are just completely haywire, that are just going to derail or not make sense. And as a player, I have to trust that if I have an idea, the DM will let me see it out, right? And not just say, no, I didn't say that there was a chandelier, so no, there's not a chandelier. We both trust each other that this will be cool. Let's see what happens. And so that's just, there's been some great moments with that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So I do want to talk about spotlighting from a DM's perspective just really briefly. And I think we're getting close to wrapping up, folks. So thank you so much for being here. And so if you have questions, now's a great time. We're gonna answer anything that y'all put out before we close out. But on the spotlighting thing, one thing that I do as a DM, whether it's a stream game or a home game, is I'm watching y'all all the time, right? I always feel like as the GM, you're the first viewer, right? And so what I like to do is I pretend I'm a director and I just shift the camera around. Okay, so y'all are talking, I'm like, okay, pause. Y'all, what are you doing right now? Right? And how does that expand or how does that go from there? Um, and I find that that's really useful. And sometimes you can ask people, hey, what are you thinking? Like, what's your internal monologue? Like, what are you feeling? And all that. And maybe it's something else, but it allows you to kind of keep that balance. I think it's a really important thing for the DM to, players I think can invite each other into scenes, and having players to do it is the best gift in the world. So if you're a player, invite your friends into scenes, invite other players into scenes, and you're making everybody's life better. Like it's better for you, it's better for the other player, it's way better for the DM. That's just fucking awesome. Like do it as much as you can. Um, but then as a DM, right, like your job is to be watching and shifting focus to other folks. One thing that I think is way different though for a stream game versus a home game, just on this is, on a stream game, basically everybody usually, right? Everybody's a very active participant. In a home game, sometimes you have folks that are enjoying it, but they don't want to be as active, right? And just make sure that you're like check in with them. They can talk about their feelings, they can talk about whatever, but also give them room to just kind of be more of an audience member if that's what they want to be. So that was my one caveat for that bit of DM advice.
Yeah, I think in general, talking to each other out of the game is just so important. Whether it's a stream game, a home game, checking in with the other people that you're at the table with. Hey, what do you like? What do you not like? How can I help? Or, oh, I thought you were disengaged, but actually that's your preferred method of participation. Only way I'll know that is if I talk to you. So that's just the best advice that you could have, is just talk to the people at your table about what's going well, what's not going well, where everybody's at. It'll answer a lot of questions and resolve problems before they become problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So then I'd ask you, just because I have y'all here. Give me some thoughts. Like, I'd love to understand. I'd love to understand a little bit about what do y'all think is happening with the Hound and the Warlock, and why do you think these folks are chasing Kit?
That's I'll let Paula answer that.
Oh man, it's such a tough question because Kit really has no idea. And I mean, obviously, I say obviously, but it seems to be going in the direction that it's something to do with her past, with her history. She doesn't know about her history before, she has memories. She doesn't know her first memories are of her being in an orphanage. She doesn't know who her parents were, her family. She had this or has this key that she wears that she's always had. And obviously, there's something special about it. It has given her the ability to be stealthy, to hide, which has obviously been really great for her as a street thief rogue. But now it is seeming to kind of awaken, maybe with some additional special things. It's a dagger now, and that was revealed in near the end of last episode. So it definitely does seem like it has something to do with this artifact, with this weapon, especially because she has memory of maybe someone seeing this, and then after that is kind of when all of this chase stuff started happening. So other than that, like, she has no clue because she has no real knowledge of her history, of her past. So it'll be really interesting to see what that is, because as Paula, I have no idea. And as Kit has no idea. So it's really just like this big mystery. And I love mysteries.
There's been so many good moments where you ask out of character to Jason specifically, like, do I know about this? And the answer is always like, nope. Like,
Nope, you don't.
Yeah, no clue. Like, no follow-up, just a plain no. And that builds a lot of creative moments and I think it's because most of the time information does flow so freely that when there is a little bit more secrecy, it just adds so much more. And then, we get these drip feeding of clues. There's the barbers and butchers. There's even before that, just the note with Kit's face, like the wanted poster. And then, now we have like the name, the Warlock, and we've met the Hound, and we don't even know how they play together. And, there's a lot of stuff that it's not that there's no information, it's that there's a lot of questions with the information we have, and no way to cheat and get more.
And all of the stuff with the crows. That was really creepy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this is the core of running a mystery in D&D, right? Just want to reiterate this one more time. Is like, it's not defined by an absence of information. It's defined by giving people information that they can't figure out how to put together. Like, think of all your favorite like detective stories, right? They get all these clues. And they're like, how the heck do I like put them together? And like, it's one thing if it's written down, but if you're playing it, like your players are not Sherlock Holmes, right? And I don't think Sherlock Holmes is, anyway, it doesn't matter. But like, nobody has all this stuff. So you give them the info, and then they're just like, how the heck do I put these puzzle pieces together to make a a complete picture. Yeah, I do want to talk about this really quick. So, Paula, you volunteered to play this. I asked if somebody was interested in playing like an orphan, right? Because I had this idea for a character, and I thought about doing it. Paula volunteered for it, which I'm really grateful for. Thank you, Paula. But it's how funny how scary it's been for me to DM a player who doesn't really know their backstory, right? Because like it seems like it's so easy for me to like fuck that up. You know what I'm saying? Like fuck up Paula's image of Kit. Right. And if I do it, like it's gonna break her heart. It's gonna ruin the fun. It's going to spoil it. It's like so much risk involved. Right. Like Zagran, Saleas, Taya. They all have risk and there's things in there, but like I can't ruin them. Um can't ruin them in the same way. And yes, in fact, we did have a bird with teeth in one episode, and the bird with teeth even has a name that I think basically none of you players know. But again, some of the cool folks who join me on the prep stream know the bird's name, the bird with teeth's name.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That thing.
Calamity.
Yeah, Calamity. Crowlamity. Oh my gosh. The bird with teeth was. I mean, there have been a lot of scary monsters, but that was disturbing, especially because I know I mentioned this before, but like the day after all that happened, I literally saw a giant crow eating another bird. And I was just like, this is getting creepy.
And yeah, just to respond to you, Krund. Yes, absolutely human teeth, and it actually bit Kit.
Yeah, right here. I want to ask though, were the teeth like, are they like straight? Like has he?
No, they would have been like
has-
really jacked up teeth. But
Okay,
you can't.
okay.
Remember, Taya shot it, and so it turned into a little demon creature.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it bit Kit.
Yeah, the
and
monsters
poisoned
have
her.
been so creepy.
Yeah.
Monsters and
Yeah,
even just the regular
monsters
Sorry.
have been amazing. There's the phlegm and blood generated things,
Oof.
whatever those were,
Yeah.
are the coolest monsters I've seen in D&D. Like the way they were described and acted and how they came to be from that creepy dwarf. All of that was just mwah. Like,
That was a
perfect.
terrifying, terrifying scene for my character and for Paula as a person. But it
Oh.
was really fun.
He was so fun. Like again, like he was so fun. And I was gonna do it one way, and then I got into the moment, and I was just inspired to go and have him like cut his arm open and flick blood, and it was just so good, just so good. Which goes back to one of the early things I said to all of you, which is, and one more bit of DMing advice because we're about at the end, but I just want to share this bit. Only PCs are PCs, and only PCs are confined by player character rules. Like, don't like if you're the DM, like you don't have to follow any rules. Your creatures don't have to follow any rules, right? They need to be consistent. Like, so they need to be consistent, and you need to constrain them in some form or fashion. But like the way that they act can be doing things that like players will never ever have access to, and like that's fine and that's awesome. Like there's no downside there, right? There's no downside there at all. So yeah, so that's good as far as crazy theories. So Josh, sorry, can you share any theories you have around Kit's this hunt for Kit?
Yeah, I think it has something to do with the artifact, the key / dagger. That seems to be important, especially because like the crow was trying to take it. So that was the first time that I noticed a motivation that was outside of Kit the person. Now, the bird could have been trying to get it in a way to disarm Kit because Kit the person is important. So it's not like conclusive, but suggests to me that the motivation is the object more than the person. And I could be wrong. But that's where I'm kind of leaning now. When it turned into a dagger, that helped re-emphasize the importance of the object. But then there's the fact of, why does Kit have the object? Like that raises a bunch of interesting questions. And there's been speculation that it has something to do with her parents. And I think that's drawn in by the clue, quote unquote, or the flag that it would be the orphanage. But I don't, as a player, I don't subscribe to that theory a whole lot. I don't know that necessarily. I haven't seen a lot of evidence or support for it has to do with Kit's parents in particular. I think it has to do with Kit's past, but not necessarily her parents is where I'm leaning now.
What do y'all think about all the birds that were following her?
Well, I was about to mention that because so crows in general, someone had said in the chat, crows aren't creepy. They're not, and I had Kit has a group, a little gang of, and they're called the crows. They're the little crows, and she has a little pocket watch fob that she carries around that's a little carved crow. And so for Kit, crows are not a bad thing, but I mean, all these birds following her have become a sinister thing. So I really have enjoyed that, and I'm so curious as to what's going on with all that. And I love that you have tied that in, Jason, because I mean, I love it when you have something in your backstory and then the DM just like takes it and like runs with it and does something cool with it. So yeah, I'm excited to see what all that's about.
Yeah, Bree, I love your theories. That would be very sad though. That would be very sad.
Oh, I'm reading the comments now. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like if Kit doesn't have enough guilt, like
pile it on.
Yeah,
She can handle it.
Oh, okay. Thanks, folks, for showing up. Appreciate y'all joining. So we're just doing a little bit of chat about the Best Left Buried show so far, where we've been, what DMing advice we have, if any. Yeah. Right. Yeah, y'all have been spotted. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we've never been rated before.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. This is our first time. So
yeah. Hello. Welcome, everyone.
Extra.
Yes.
Oh, I see. They're all posting this. Y'all are all posting the same thing. This makes more sense.
We're Twitch newbies. We barely know what a raid is. So thank you. much appreciated. And definitely make sure you click all the little fun buttons, because right now we're just doing kind of a chat session, but we play a very interesting game, to the point where we spent the last almost 2 hours just talking about theories and plans for it and not even playing it, because there's that much interest that we have in this. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And what would you recommend if you were going to try and like catch up on this game? I would say maybe starting at episode 5, if you didn't want to go all the way back to episode 1. I mean, if you want to go all the way back to episode 1 was like one of my favorite episodes. But episode 5 was really great too, and it's the first episode where all of our characters meet.
Yeah, I think that if you're interested in what we might have to offer, go to our YouTube. We have the Best Left Buried playlist there. And yeah, I would start with episode 5, because I'm confident as soon as you finish that, you'll go to episode 1 next. You won't go to episode 6. You'll want to know what happened. So start with 5 and then you'll go to 1 naturally. Trust me.
We're also planning to do start recap videos here fairly soon. So you can get like a few minute recap that gives you a series episode, so that you can kind of pick up pick up without having to go back through, well, having to, without, I think it's like 30 hours so far of what we've accumulated already.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, it's a good time to plug it. Josh has been working on a podcast for us.
Yes.
Yes, so we will very soon be up. I know a lot of people prefer audio only, and I am one of those people, so I get it. YouTube is great, the visuals are great, but just it's so much easier to consume in the car while you're working out, things like that. So we will be up on all the podcast platforms here shortly. I'm getting good at editing, so I'm going to try to release the first 5 here soon. So stay tuned and follow us on social media, join our Discord, and you'll get the announcement when you can catch up that way too.
Yeah, we have some fun over in our Discord, so come check that out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was a big one. As I wanted to get the last thing I wanted to get was just an understanding of, what theories you had about what's going on. I'm I'm curious about what you think is happening between Larry and Danelle also in Eurosa, right? Because I noticed that y'all had a lot of, I don't know if the right word is concern, but a lot of I thought it was pretty strange.
Yeah, I am concerned about Larry. I feel like the relationship dynamic there is not a healthy one. And maybe
yes, and hot grandma.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there's a little bit of a unbalanced power dynamic going on.
What?
And
yeah, it just seems to be the theme of Larry is he seems very exploited. He seems tired of it, but doesn't seem another option. Like he's, one of the conversations was like, yeah, they're offering good money here. Like he seems that he is a victim of his circumstance and he's very capable, but he's always somebody else's workhorse. And that's a damn shame because he seems like a really cool guy.
He does seem like a cool guy. I like Larry.
Are y'all going to watch the fight?
I feel like we have to at this point.
Yeah, I think that assuming we don't need to flee the city for some reason, assuming we can.
Yeah, that's a big assumption.
Right, exactly. Assuming it's safe to watch the fight, I would like to watch it.
Yeah.
If we survive our fight currently. Because you and me, Josh,
I know, we're both at 2 hit points, so.
we looking kind of rough.
Yeah. No,
that's a quick question I have is, have you thought about what happens if we die right now? Like how much would that derail your story right now if Jason, or where do you think the story might go if one of us were to drop dead?
One of you is fine. I'm very comfortable losing any one of you.
I love your attitude.
Yeah.
One of you?
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Right. 2 would be tough. Right. And all four, I would have to really think about what's going on. Right. Like, so those present real serious challenges to me. So I hope to make sure that, well, I hope we don't get into a situation where all 4 of you die permanently. Right. That would be, that'd be pretty tough. I understand that wasn't that reassuring.
No, that's let's be honest, right? There is, yeah, exactly, and that's just something that a lot of tables have had to deal with, especially if you do have a TPK. Everybody dies. What now? Because it's a
good question, but like I kind of think a lot about where are y'all fighting and when. Like, what are the stakes of every fight, right? Because it's not necessarily true that everyone just wants to kill you all either, right? Like, for example, why did the Hound and these folks come after you, and what do they want, right? Do they just want to kill you? Do they want to capture you? Like, is there some other motivation, which y'all don't know, but I know, right? So it gives me some flexibility, right, in terms of that, and like fighting's dangerous and people get killed, right? That stays true, but not all fights are necessarily like they're trying to kill you all. Like sometimes they want to whatever take you hostage. I love that suggestion, Bree, like an escape from Shadowfell type session, right? Like we looked at that module. What was that module that we saw, Josh?
The Black Ballad.
Yeah, the Black Ballad, right? Which is basically the story of, a little adventure that starts at a TPK. Like you can always go in new directions with these things, right? But obviously everybody dying would be pretty bad.
So let's hope that that stays buried then. That concept is best left buried.
In that little mini arc, the other nice thing I do want to say one more. The little mini arc that we're planning, a nice part about that is because it is really just there to because it exists, and we haven't started this yet, but folks that are watching, if you're new, we're planning a little arc here, 3 to 4 sessions of with different characters exploring something that's happening at the same time as this main story to show another perspective and to give y'all a sense of what sort of threats are arising, on the in the world while our heroes are off doing their adventure because we've got this real living world, right? But one of the nice things about that is, it is intended to be really just showing how dangerous some villain is. So everybody dies, it's like that Rocky quote, like, if he dies, he dies. Now
I
you
will
know why I
say
don't do
that
Russian accents right there.
I will say though that I was like, all right, it'll be good to play in this mini arc a character that feels more disposable than Zagrin, who I've spent a lot of time thinking of and hope doesn't die. But I think back, Rickman was completely disposable in Heroes of Windgrove, and now I care a lot about him. That it's almost hard to, for me at least, to create a character that is disposable, because the second I start to get in their headspace, I'm really rooting for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons it's so hard to 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 kill PCs. Like it took me a while to get you know get into the idea of how do you do it, like attacking down characters, right? Like at first I was really when I started DMing I was really reticent to do it, and now it's like, well, it depends on my character, right? Like when we were playing Heroes of Windgrove, the jellies that y'all fought, like they were attacking down characters because they were trying to eat you, right? And that was it. Like I didn't want your characters to die, like I very actively didn't, but it's a jelly and it's a predator and it's gonna attack you, right?
And that's why I like the balance of this game a lot, and why I feel comfortable calling ourselves Heroes Die, even though we haven't yet. Is because I like the aspect of, you don't want our characters to die. It's not an antagonistic DM relationship where it's us versus you, but at the same time, the monsters are real and the world is real enough that they are going to do what they do, and that changes depending on what we're fighting. But also that I feel confident that you won't handcuff yourself for the sake of, oh, I don't want to kill you, because that would upset my story somehow. That, if characters die, they die. That's the game that we at this table are playing, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, you have to have stakes, I think, for it to be a fun, engaging, and interesting game. So having high stakes is not a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Right. Like it's it's really important, right? And it's really important to be able to kill your characters, right? From a narrative perspective. Like none of you is the chosen one. Like y'all will have all come together in a reasonable way, but like you're all functionally disposable, right? Again, I mean that in the nicest way possible.
I felt
Uh,
the love. I felt
yeah.
the love there.
Uh, okay. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Well, I think that's been time.
On
So
that note,
yeah, yeah. I really appreciate everybody taking the time watching. Josh and Paula, this has been, at least from my end, like a super fun session. I hope y'all have enjoyed it.
yeah,
So let's
Absolutely.
do, yeah, Calamity obviously is
the chosen one.
is indispensable. No, I'm kidding. Like so, one last bit of DMing advice. If you're gonna have an NPC in contact with a party, you have to be emotionally ready for that NPC to die every time they interact with your players, right? Like whether it's a villain or not, like you always have to be ready, right? Like and that one's scary, but really, really worthwhile. Um, okay, well, I think Forest of Lore inspired me. Do y'all want to, people in the chat, do you mind if we try and do a raid over to another channel? That seems like a fun Twitch thing to
Yeah.
try.
Yeah.
I've seen the button before and I've not tried it. So
Let's do it.
let's give it a shot. Everyone ready?
Oh, wait,
All
someone
right.
said before you leave,
Yep.
Kit's backstory gives off Anastasia vibes, and I kind of love it. Anastasia, I'm sorry,
Oh.
I actually don't know that story. I'll have to look it up though.
Speaking of Russian accents.
Yeah. I don't know the
Kit's
details of
backstory
that.
gives
but-
off Anastasia vibes. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't understand the. Although to be clear, I also had to Google what was that dramatic. What was the word you used, Josh?
Dramatic irony.
Dramatic
Yeah.
irony. Yeah. So
I love that.
Yeah. So
Okay,
Kit's
I'll look up
backstory
Anastasia.
is really, and I'll take a look too because that seems worth looking into. Yeah, that's Kit's backstory was intended for me, right? I thought about this character story that I'd love to unveil, and then I just really basically worked with Paula to make that a reality, and we're finding a mix of it's real and it's Paula's, but also the fundamentals of that story are kind of left in the DM's hands, and it's a very scary concept. All right, so I've watched this show a couple times before, and I like it. So this is Casters and Castles, stylistically different from what we tend to do here, but I still think it's really neat. So gonna send y'all over there. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next Saturday from 1 to 4 Central Time for episode 11 of Best Left Buried.
I can't wait.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
catch y'all later. And let's go. Sure, let's go. I think it's going. I can't tell.
Someone said, "What do we say?"
Oh, I don't know. Say hello, I guess. I don't need to say anything in particular. There we go. There we go. Just say hello. All right.
Cool. Okay, now it looks like.
Uh-oh.
Are we off stream?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see us on the thing anymore.
Okay, it's switched over now to. Yeah, switched over to the other thing.
All right.
That was cool. We've never been rated before.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really stuck around, but maybe we got a follow or two. I don't know.
Hey, we got a bunch.
Yeah. If nothing else, we're on people's radar. If they see us while they're scrolling through, oh, those are the people that Forest of Lore rated. Let me check them out. They said a couple things in chat, so that'll help our little chat engagement number. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a shame they came in like as we're like, all right, so we're gonna wrap up, and
I
it's like,